If freedom without excuses is the condition of human existence, then radical responsibility is its unavoidable consequence. For Jean-Paul Sartre, responsibility is not something one acquires through maturity, reflection, or moral development. It is not earned. It is not optional. Responsibility is simply what freedom looks like when taken seriously. Sartre's use of the word radical is precise. Responsibility is radical because it goes to the root of action. It does not stop at intention, motivation, or circumstance. It does not end with personal choice narrowly defined. Responsibility extends to what one makes of a situation, how one interprets it, and what one allows it to become through action or inaction. This is where Sartre departs sharply from most moral frameworks. Traditional ethics often locates responsibility within limits. One is responsible for what one intended, or for what one directly caused, or for what one could reasonably foresee. Sartre rejects these boundaries. He believes they function primarily as protections rather than as honest accounts of agency. For Sartre, to act at all is to take responsibility not only for the action, but for the meaning of that action. One does not merely do something, one affirms it as acceptable. Even when one acts reluctantly, defensively, or under pressure, one still endorses a way of responding to the world. This endorsement is what gives responsibility its radical scope. Sartre insists that one cannot say, "I did not mean for this to happen," and consider the matter closed. Meaning is not confined to intention. It is created through action in the world. Outcomes matter because they are part of what one has chosen to bring into existence. This insistence feels brutal because it denies moral escape routes that people rely on daily. People want to believe that good intentions protect them, that difficult circumstances mitigate guilt, and that necessity narrows responsibility. Sartre refuses all three. He does not deny that intentions matter. He denies that they absolve. He does not deny that circumstances constrain. He denies that they excuse. He does not deny that necessity exists. He denies that it removes agency. Responsibility for Sartre therefore includes what one tolerates. To live within a system is to sustain it. To benefit from an arrangement is to participate in it. One may dislike this fact, one may resist it partially, but one cannot pretend to stand outside it. This is why Sartre's responsibility extends beyond individual actions into collective life. One is responsible not only for what one does, but for what one allows to be done in one's name, with one's consent, or through one's silence. Silence is not neutral. It is a stance. At this point, Sartre's philosophy becomes deeply uncomfortable for modern sensibilities. Contemporary ethics often emphasizes intention, context, and systemic explanation. Sartre does not reject these considerations, but he refuses to let them replace judgment. To explain harm is not to dissolve responsibility for it. Sartre believes that modern societies are particularly skilled at dispersing responsibility until it appears to vanish. Bureaucracy, hierarchy, and specialization allow individuals to perform harmful actions while feeling personally innocent. One processes paperwork, another gives orders, another carries them out. No one feels responsible for the whole. Sartre's radical responsibility cuts through this diffusion. He insists that each participant remains responsible for their part, even if that part seems small, routine, or unavoidable. Responsibility does not disappear when it is shared. It multiplies. This multiplication is precisely what people resist. To accept radical responsibility is to accept guilt without consolation. It is to accept that one's life is not morally clean, and that no explanation will fully absolve it. Sartre does not offer a way out of this condition. He offers only honesty about it. This honesty also reshapes how Sartre understands moral judgment. He does not believe that responsibility requires constant condemnation or moralizing. It requires acknowledgement. One must be willing to say, "I chose this." even when the choice was constrained, fearful, or compromised. Sartre believes that refusing to acknowledge responsibility is worse than choosing badly. To act and deny agency is to live in bad faith. To act and accept responsibility, even for failure, is to live honestly. This is why Sartre rejects the ideal of moral purity. Purity suggests a position untouched by compromise, error, or guilt. Sartre believes such a position is imaginary. To live in the world is to become implicated. The attempt to remain pure often results in passivity that allows injustice to continue. Radical responsibility, therefore, does not promise moral comfort. It promises seriousness. One accepts that one's actions matter, that they have consequences beyond intention, and that no authority will rescue one from their weight. At this stage, Sartre has not yet told us how responsibility should be exercised. He has only shown its scope. Responsibility is not a rule book. It is a condition. It is what freedom demands once excuses are stripped away. The pressure now intensifies. If responsibility is this radical, then the question becomes unavoidable. How do people live while denying it? How do they act freely while insisting they are not responsible? That question leads directly to Sartre's most famous and unsettling concept. That concept is bad faith. If responsibility is as radical as Sartre claims, then the central problem of human life is not ignorance, weakness, or confusion. It is evasion. People act, choose, and commit themselves every day, yet they construct elaborate narratives to deny that they are responsible for what they have done. Sartre's philosophy exists to expose this evasion and to show how deeply it structures ordinary life. Sartre names this evasion bad faith. Bad faith is not hypocrisy, and it is not deliberate lying. It is something more intimate and more pervasive, the act of lying to oneself, while continuing to act as if one were honest. Bad faith allows an individual to behave as a free agent while denying that they are free, to benefit from choice while claiming innocence. This internal contradiction is what makes bad faith so effective. A person in bad faith does not simply deny freedom. They oscillate between freedom and determinism depending on which is more convenient. When responsibility threatens, they appeal to necessity. When praise is available, they appeal to choice. Sartre sees this pattern everywhere. The reason bad faith is so tempting is that radical responsibility is psychologically unbearable. To accept responsibility without appeal is to accept that one's life is not morally clean, that one's actions cannot be fully justified, and that no authority will intervene to absolve guilt. Bad faith offers relief from this weight. Sartre insists that this relief comes at a cost. To deny responsibility is to deny oneself as an agent. It is to reduce oneself to a thing, a role, a function, a product of circumstance. This reduction may feel safe, but it empties life of seriousness. One becomes something that happens rather than something that acts. This reduction is most visible in social roles. People often define themselves through their position, their job, their status, their identity. These roles come with expectations that make behavior feel automatic rather than chosen. Sartre does not deny that roles organize social life. He denies that they erase agency. To say, "I am just doing my job," is to treat a choice as a fact. It is to pretend that one's actions flow from a role rather than from a decision to occupy that role in a particular way. Sartre believes that this pretense is one of the most common forms of bad faith in modern societies. Radical responsibility cuts through this pretense. It insists that one is responsible not only for entering a role, but for how one performs it, what one tolerates within it, and what one allows it to justify. A role may constrain action, but it never eliminates judgment. Sartre extends this analysis to collective life. Individuals often dissolve responsibility by appealing to group membership. They say everyone was doing it, this is how things work, or this is what the movement requires. Sartre hears these statements as attempts to replace judgment with belonging. Belonging is powerful because it distributes guilt. When responsibility is shared, it feels diluted. Sartre rejects this feeling. Responsibility does not vanish when it is distributed. Each participant remains responsible for sustaining the whole. This insistence places Sartre in tension with moral frameworks that prioritize outcome over agency. Sartre does not deny the importance of outcomes. He denies that good outcomes erase bad means. To justify action solely by results is to convert responsibility into calculation. Sartre's radical responsibility therefore stands opposed to moral systems that promise redemption through success. One does not become innocent because a cause triumphs. One remains responsible for what one has done in its name. This position leads to one of Sartre's most controversial claims. There is no moral refuge in history. Appeals to progress, necessity, or inevitability do not absolve. History does not act, people act, and history is what we call the accumulation of their actions afterward. To say history required this is to deny agency retroactively. Sartre believes this denial is one of the most dangerous forms of bad faith because it allows violence to masquerade as destiny. Responsibility dissolves into inevitability. Radical responsibility refuses this move. It insists that even when action is taken under pressure, one remains answerable for choosing to act rather than refuse, comply rather than resist, or remain silent rather than speak. This insistence does not produce moral certainty. It produces moral risk. Sartre does not promise that responsible action will lead to good outcomes or moral clarity. He promises only that refusing responsibility will lead to self-deception. Responsibility for Sartre is therefore not a path to peace. It is a condition of seriousness. One acts knowing that one may be wrong, that harm may follow, and that guilt cannot be fully erased. Sartre believes that accepting this risk is more honest than clinging to innocence. This belief explains why Sartre rejects the language of moral purity. Purity suggests a position outside implication, a place from which one can judge without being judged. Sartre denies that such a place exists. To live is to become involved. Radical responsibility also reshapes how Sartre understands authenticity. Authenticity is not self-expression or inner harmony. It is the refusal to deny one's freedom and responsibility. An authentic life is not one free of guilt, but one that acknowledges guilt without alibis. This acknowledgement does not require constant self-condemnation. It requires clarity. One must be willing to say, "I chose this," even when the choice was constrained, fearful, or compromised. One must resist the temptation to rewrite one's actions as inevitabilities. Sartre believes that most people fail at this, not because they are malicious, but because the demand is severe. Radical responsibility offers no consolation. It does not promise forgiveness, redemption, or moral completion. It promises only honesty. By the end of this argument, Sartre has stripped away nearly every moral shelter. There is no appeal to role, intention, necessity, history, or belonging that can dissolve responsibility. What remains is the individual, acting in a world without guarantees. This is why Sartre's philosophy feels exhausting. It demands constant vigilance. One must repeatedly resist the temptation to become an object rather than an agent, a function rather than a chooser. Yet Sartre believes that this vigilance is the price of dignity. To deny responsibility is to deny one's humanity. To accept it is to live without excuses, even when excuses would be comforting. Radical responsibility does not make life easier, it makes it serious. And it is this seriousness, unforgiving, exposed, and unresolved, that defines Sartre's vision of human existence. It is also the point at which his philosophy turns outward, toward conflict with others, power, and society itself. That is where the next analysis must go.